right, welcome back on this cold Tuesday.
Yes, it is.
Well, at least when we're recording, it's cold. I don't know when we will actually.
Even if it's 30 degrees warmer tomorrow, it's going to feel like it's a heat wave, isn't it?
Still cold.
But it'll be a heat wave compared to today because we're in single digits.
Negative.
Yeah,
All
with the wind chill.
had like a 2-hour delay today
You-
because of going out to the bus and whatever.
I don't remember getting really 2-hour delays. I mean, I walk to school. I know it sounds like the old age scenario. I walk through the mountains and
Yeah.
all this stuff. No.
Uphill both ways.
But I did have to walk to school, and I walked through school even if it was snowy out. But I don't really, other than the blizzard of 78, yes, I lived through that, and it was torture. But that was several days off from school that I remember, and the rest of it is a blur, really.
Did you go to Dayton Public, or
Yeah, actually I did.
they call off for like flurries?
Now,
Yeah.
they didn't before.
They were off last week, like the first really cold day we had.
Like, I seriously think, if I remember, maybe we got that week off of the blizzard only because literally you couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the snow was above our porch. So, like, even if we had come out the front door, we couldn't get off of the porch.
Yeah.
It was insane, really insane. I don't ever want to see snow like that again. I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not a fan of the cold. I'm in 3 layers right now, so my 4th layer is when I go outside, but it's like,
I have this like wool sweater that I got at Boot Barn,
cute.
and it is more warm than like my winter coat.
Yeah.
Like I just need to find a winter coat that's wool.
Well, there's that. So, since we've talked about weather and everything, what else do you want to talk about? Big day, big weekend, all the stuff. Well, we did our Trump special the other day,
Oh,
the
yeah.
last week, right? So the update obviously is that everybody's in office now,
Yep.
and
he's
or
already
getting sworn in.
making quite the splash of executive orders.
Yeah,
There's
it was a
supposed to-
flurry.
There's supposed to be an infrastructure announcement today, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, so by the time this gets broadcast and on there, then we'll already know what that information is. So,
Yeah.
but exciting because again, JD Vance as vice president does come from our area. So yes, we are excited about that.
Yeah.
Vivek is obviously from our area as well, out of Cincinnati.
Yeah, but I heard he is not going to be part of Doge.
Yeah, but did you see why?
Yeah, because he's going to run for governor.
For Ohio.
Yeah.
That is so super exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really, really excited about
Well,
that.
also, John Husted is going to replace J.D. Vance in the Senate.
Yeah.
So we should be having a lieutenant governor appointment soon.
Ohio is in the house, and
Yeah.
as long as that lieutenant governor doesn't come from the Dayton area, I'll be happy with it.
Yeah. Well, DeWine is from Greene County.
Yeah,
So, and Husted is from Kettering.
I know.
Yeah.
So we are fully represented. I mean, like,
Yeah.
hometown rules, right?
Yeah, I think this is the first person in my lifetime that is like a president or vice president from
The area.
Ohio.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
I know that there is more presidents from Ohio than any other state,
Correct.
but
All prior our time.
yeah. And I think the last president to do 2 terms not consecutively was Grover Cleveland, and I believe he was from Ohio too.
And that's the only other one. So
Yeah.
Trump is the second one to do that.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty remarkable, historic type of things going on. So,
yeah, it'll be interesting.
yeah, and how that
First 100 days at least.
Yep, and how that shapes, the future of everything. I think regardless of everything else, there is a buzz that's going on with real estate, with development, especially when you get an announcement that there's going to be an infrastructure major announcement. People are really looking at that because is that going to involve the community aspect of roadways or IT or what's going on? How is that going to play in?
Well, especially because the last administration would use infrastructure to try to get like bills through that had absolutely nothing to do with infrastructure.
Right, right. But Trump's background is real estate and development. And
Yeah.
so I think that is going to play very positive in our real estate market. I mean, I'm just saying, I think so.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm offending anybody, but these things are something that you look forward to when you know markers and past historical impacts on our industry. because the mortgage rates are an important piece of that. He talks to the affordability of things. He talks to lowering the cost and lowering those rates and getting money back into the pockets of the Americans. And obviously, all of those things speak to the value of somebody being able to buy a home or continue to live in a home type of thing. And then maybe at some point, you venture off and you get into investment sides of it. And I think having somebody with that perspective is certainly an important aspect to our industry.
Yeah. And back to his executive orders yesterday, I think one of my favorite ones was that we have stopped all foreign aid, and that money is going to be redirected to North Carolina, California, that are having, the natural disasters,
which you would want to help here home before, it's like you've got to wear your own oxygen mask before you help another. It's the same mentality as we need to be taking care of our own before we reach out and start sending away all the money and everything like that. Like it can't be where it goes. Sure, we want to help others, but we have to help ourselves first too.
Correct.
So, some exciting things, and background a little bit. I started in real estate in Arizona, outside of Phoenix, and so, when we start hearing these stories about the border crisis and the impact of it and everything, I can tell from way back, so this was mid-90s that I lived there, and there was real impact about that border security. And I know as an American what it took for me to be able to go south of the border. And so when you see, that that's not how it's been, and that there's been this free reign of people being able to come and go and not really any kind of identification process in it. I can't go to any other country in the world without going through multiple layers of screening, verification, ID, fingerprint scans, whatever it is, those mechanisms that are out there. It blows my mind that we've had that for the last number of years, and really it's been abused.
Yeah. I even saw that beginning last week that to travel to Europe now, you have to have you have to apply, and I don't know what the exact term of it is, but you have to pay so much money, and then they have to accept if you're going to be able to come over.
Right. So, you haven't had to do a visa in some of those areas, but you've always had to provide your information in advance. When you check into the hotel or where you're staying, they have the right to take and keep your passport as a way of confirming that you're coming back, or that they can track you. But now, the information that you have to provide isn't just where you're going and what your purpose is there, but it has to be for the whole itinerary. So when we first landed, funny story, when we first landed, and I took my family to France, we landed in Paris in the Charles de Gaulle airport, which is huge, like one of the largest airports that I have ever been in my life at that time, and I was like overwhelmed. I thought I had done all of this planning. We knew the hotels that we were going to stay at for the most part, and we didn't know if there would be any delays or anything. So that first night, I didn't have a room. And I just assumed, we'll go down, we'll find a little area, we can get a room and do all of this. We could not leave the airport until I had a booked, confirmed room at a hotel. So they ask you for this information. So this was before the change that they're coming in with now. They ask you this information, and I was like, oh, I don't. And they're like, no, you have to have this. And like, we won't dispatch you from this location until you confirm that you have it. So I had to go off, and I'm like, well, I don't even know where we want to stay. I don't know what we want to do. And so they did have some airport hotels that were off-site, off the airport itself, but in the area of the airport. So I'm like, well, I guess we'll do that, and then we can take the train and we can go in, whatever. So I ended up having to do that. And my kids were like, well, I thought you had all this planned. And I'm like, well, I thought I had it all planned, but I thought I had a little bit of flexibility here.
Yeah.
Lesson learned.
That's why you should use a travel agent.
Yeah. Well, I got to get that travel agent on my schedule so that it works for everything. But it was a very important lesson that you just can't, you hear these stories about people backpacking all through the country and they just kind of fly by the seat of their pants. And is that still possible? I'm sure that there are ways. But now, especially with the changes that they've incorporated and it takes place this year, is that you have to give your full itinerary. Like, I'm flying in on this flight, I'm going to stay at this hotel or at this inn, this is the purpose of my trip, and I'm going to leave the area on this day and I'm going to go here and I'm going to do all of that information. And they want your home contact information. So, you always give your emergency contact when you travel.
Yeah.
Well, they want all of that details. And so they are asking for a lot more verification of the process of what your purpose of that is. And I'll caveat that with Rome and Italy specifically, but Rome specifically as the city, passed legislation that they were restricting Airbnbs, that the lock boxes that they used, which they gave as a gate code. So if you make a room Airbnb, there's a chance that you're just making that reservation online and a person is confirming it, and then you don't see anybody. The day of your travel, you get this code that gives you access to the Airbnb. But unlike a hotel where you're checking in, they're looking at your passport, they're keeping your passport, or they're verifying information, none of that really takes place with the Airbnb process. And so now it will. So now the requirement is, as the manager of that property, you have to go and you have to verify that person's credentials are what was registered for it. So you can't have any more of these ghost registrations and then anybody come in and take over the unit. And the idea is that this is for their terrorism and security of their country, which when I read the details of that, I was like, holy crap, who realized that that was being misused by somebody? Thanks, you guys spoiled it for us travelers, that now we have to go through these extra steps. But it absolutely makes sense. So when we had that Las Vegas incident that took place with the Tesla, and the New Orleans thing that took place, and they were talking about that vehicle rental, that's the same idea. You're not going to a Hertz counter and giving your information and being validated.
I've used Turo before.
So it's kind of hands off and anybody can do it and there's no validation.
Which, with those two things, I was like, okay, that's like saying they both stayed in an Airbnb the night before. Like, it's the online, you rent the car, and then, at least with Turo, though, I would say the majority of the time, the owner drops it off to you. So they do see you, and you have to submit your driver's license and all of that stuff.
Is that right?
Yeah, we've used it when we go out to Vegas. We'll get like a Tesla for the day. Because there's...
so when you're thinking, who does that?
Yeah, there's chargers everywhere out there where there's not here. So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'll drive a Tesla. This would be fun.
Well, and I think when you start looking at the security aspect of it, if they're verifying it, which if they weren't, they will now, right? Because now there's been so much criticism of it. But the idea is that you need to be able to authenticate that information just for security purposes.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't open my home and just let somebody come in and rent a room for me. Wouldn't be safe or secure for myself or my family. So if I don't take those precautions along the way, I think that's the same as a property manager. I obviously am going to take those precautions to protect the property, to protect the investor client, right? So grand scale of things, you think then how countries have to look at that as well. So I'm glad we're doing some of the things that we're doing. I think we're definitely going to be moving in a better direction for things. Yeah. But I think that there will be other legislation that follows as a result of some of the things that have happened too.
Yeah. So that kind of like leads into a good topic for today. It's like Airbnbs and VRBOs. So they were really big 2019, 2020, I feel like, especially when the interest rates were so low. But there's restrictions on them now. They're looked down upon, whatever the case may be. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, obviously, the Realtor Association I'm not speaking for them, but as a realtor, our association has been very proactive in protecting the rights of ownership. And that ownership may also include, and certainly it does, the rights of investors to be able to utilize the property in order to gain the value, the equity, and to benefit from that, right? So it kind of comes down to, you have this mentality of some of our municipalities that says, not in our backyard, NIMBYism. We don't want this taking place in our backyard. It brings down the value. We wouldn't just have a hotel opening up every other door. And so they use that logic to try to limit the amount of how many Airbnbs can be out there.
Like I know in the Dayton area, Oakwood, you have to be 30 days or more
Right.
in an Airbnb.
So that kind of changes it. That means it's a short-term rental.
Yeah.
And really, it's not like a couple of nights stay, which defeated some of the purposes of some of the investors. You have games that come in, UD Flyer games, and people just come in for the weekend. Parents want to come in for parents' weekend. They're only going to stay for 3 or 4 or 5 days, right? Maybe they stay a week, but they're not here for a month because they're going to go back home and do what they need to do. So that is where it inhibits the right of the property owner to be able to do those things that works in the best interest of the property. Plus, it limits their earnings, because what I could get for a 3, 5, 7 day stay may be effectively greater than what I would get as a month rent, right? If I was renting the property out on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
So those are all things that really come into consideration with the legislation, with the idea of what are communities really trying to do, and understand trying to protect property rights on one hand, but also trying to protect the ability of people to do what they want. And, you know, that's a sticking point with me. I should be able to have a granny pod out on my yard if I want,
Right.
as long as it's compliant in other ways and meeting the easement boundaries and things like that. But if you tell me, well, you can't have a second person living there, well, that doesn't even make sense. Like, it doesn't fit the needs of the community. So the needs of the community really needs to also be considered, and that's where your zoning and restrictions and things like that really have to be updated, because they haven't been updated in forever, and the community needs have to be respected, at least considered.
Yeah. Do you think that Airbnbs are more of like a vacation town thing? Or, because I mean, people don't vacation to Ohio generally.
Well, I mean, we just talked about it. We have the big 4 conferences when
Yeah,
basketball
unless-
comes in. So there are events that bring people here.
Well, I mean, like, unless it's for a specific event or a concert, or,
Right.
you know, something like that, which
Right.
those are a lot smaller. Instead of like, you know, I'm gonna go spend a week at the beach, I'm gonna go spend a week in Dayton, Ohio.
Right. Well, and so that's where the difference is. But somebody who's looking to check out historical districts may want to come and visit and stay in our Oregon district or the St. Anne's Hill. So there would be reasons why you can't say why a person comes here. And again, I think family members are another rationale that hasn't been considered. You know, you may not have the room for the family to come and stay with you, but they want to come and they want to spend the holidays. So if they could do an Airbnb in the general area of where you are, they would get a week and stay there, or 3 or 4 days, whatever they can, right?
Yeah, and I think definitely like a benefit of an Airbnb over a hotel is you get all of the kitchen and
You get use of
living room, like
facilities.
just more space.
It's more than just a hotel room, especially you travel with small kids.
Yeah.
It's great in one way that, hey, we're getting a hotel, we're all going to do all of this fun stuff. But when the kids go to bed at 8 and you want to stay up and watch the evening news, right? Or the late night news, I guess it would be.
Yeah.
Now you're all in one room, right? It's harder to do that. There's times when it works and times when it doesn't. And again, just understanding the dynamics and the change in people and what they want to be able to do. If I owned a property and it was a rental investment and I can make more money by renting it out a third of the month than what I would get on a annual monthly rental rate, why wouldn't I do that? And then that gives me the downtime for maintenance, repairs, for upkeep, for whatever, and then a bonus money when I rent it even longer than that.
Yeah.
You kind of have to understand. Now, the flip side of that, falls into what people want to blame as to the shortage of housing inventory that we have. And they say that that's tied into this Airbnb effect. I don't know that it is. I think at the time maybe that some investors turned their property from a potential, I'll sell the property, to no, I'm just going to rent it out. Who knows what that is? It could be personal reasons that they want to hold the value of the asset.
Yeah.
They don't want to just sell it and be done, move on to the next thing. Again, who knows what their reason is, right? So we have to be respectful of, it's a property and they want to do this. So the value add should be there. And I don't know that it's the legal right of a municipality to restrict that.
So coming from like the city or township or whomever's point of view, do you think that rentals aren't kept up as well, especially ones where there's somebody different in it every day?
Well, and that is the rationale that a lot of the municipalities use, is that how can you be keeping up with it if every other day you have a different person staying in it? That goes back to management, obviously. Are they using a professional property manager? Are they doing it themselves? They're not required to use a property manager. If it is an individual owner, they can certainly take care of that themselves. If somebody is going to be paid in order to take care of the property, the state of Ohio requires that to be a professional realtor. So they do need a real estate license to be a property manager. To be paid for the services of managing another person's property, you have to have a real estate license. A lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
A lot of people are in violation of that. A lot of people as landlords, owners, but using somebody to pay them to oversee their property, are using people who are not licensed realtors and therefore in violation. That person is in violation of the legal law. But people try to cut the corners, they try to do something that they can, and they don't realize the impact of it. Property management is one of the things that is highest in discrimination lawsuits, fair housing lawsuits, in nuances, the nuisance complaints with the cities. And so that is the mentality that a lot of the municipalities have, is that we have all these issues with rentals. So how, if we have issues with rentals where there's stable tenancy, how could you not say that that is going to carry over to the Airbnb market? And then we've obviously had those big cases where massive parties have been thrown at an Airbnb and
Yeah.
the neighbors have issues. And so things happen and it spirals and gets out of control. And yes, the actions of one affect all of the others.
Well, I've seen people that will go and get an Airbnb to have their kid's birthday party there so that they don't trash their own house.
Yeah, but a lot of the Airbnbs, at least those that I've stayed in, have strict rules.
But is it really enforced?
I mean, I'm a rule follower in that respect, but when I know somebody's got my credit card,
Yeah.
I'm not going to leave it to where they're going to just be able to rack that up on my card, because
Right.
it's going to be clean. It's going to be like it was when I left it. That's me personally. Obviously, not everybody does that. But that's why there is now a larger deposit hold. That's why you have all of these rules that come about, is because of the people that don't follow the rules.
So that's interesting that you have to be a licensed realtor to be a property manager, but you don't have to be a licensed realtor to be the property manager of an HOA?
So even your builders, your named builders, developers that have come in, will hire people to represent their complex or their homes, and they're not necessarily licensed realtors.
Yeah.
So when you go in and you talk with the guy or the gal, and they're telling you about all these home designs and everything, the difference is that they're being paid as an employee, even if it's done as a subcontractor through the developer. They're being paid by the developer for representation to them, and they are not licensed as realtors. Sometimes there are realtors who will do that, but that has to be disclosed. You're signing realtor papers if the realtor is being representing one of the parties, right?
Yeah.
That's required. But if you are just there doing the work of the builder, likely not going to be a real estate professional. Does that mean that they're in the wrong? No, because they are falling into this criteria that they're working for this entity and representing them. Now, why that plays different with real estate and property management is, again, because of those things that we talked about. It is tenancy rights and acts, landlord-tenant acts. Those are all things that are very specific to real estate. As an individual, I can manage my own property, and I don't have to be a realtor. Okay, so that's Mary Murphy's Law and all that kind of stuff, where if it's under a certain amount, if it's whatever. So there's criteria that come into this. But as soon as you, as a person, have a property and you want me to manage it, if you just said, hey, you're my friend, could you just take this on? I'll pay you a portion of this. As soon as there's an exchange of money for me to manage a property for another person, that calls in my real estate license. I am a realtor, I have a real estate license, but if I didn't, 'cause let's reverse it, I wanted to pay you something in order to manage a property for me, and it's in your area, you just go in and check on it, and I'll pay you some proceeds. Knowing that you don't have a real estate license, that's where it's illegal. That's where it's in conflict with real estate law.
So I guess those HOA managers
Are working
for a
that company, and so they are hired by that company and not specific to having, and in most cases, it's an admin type of job.
Yeah, pays the bills, deals with the board.
Yeah, if anything at all.
Yeah.
In most cases, right?
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people have good experiences with their HOAs, unfortunately.
Yeah, just depends. If you go into it knowing what the HOA is responsible for, what the rules are, it's a lot better experience than, oh, I didn't even know this house was in an HOA.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So in the future, back to Airbnbs, do you think that we're going to see an increase, stay about the same, or a decrease?
I think people have found a way that it makes money and that they want to keep them. I think municipalities have been challenged in some respects, and until there is a legal course that changes that, we'll probably stay about the same. I'm surprised to know as many of them in our area that we actually have.
Yeah.
Like in areas that I wouldn't necessarily think about that this has been a thing. And again, it comes down to, I've got this big massive house, I no longer really need it, I can close off this one half, I can rent that out, that's gonna help pay for my mortgage. I Airbnb it, and all day long they rent them, and it's like, didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
You know, I probably wouldn't do that with my house, again, just because I'm there and it's a safety feature or aspect for me. Me living there makes a difference. If it was just that I wanted to hold it as a inventory in a investment portfolio, maybe you do that and you could split it off and you could get multiple people in there. I think it just comes down to, you know, individuals' needs really at that point.
Yeah. I like staying in them. But it depends on the trip.
For sure. And I've stayed in them. We've stayed in some phenomenal Airbnbs in other countries. I like the ability to do a lot of the things that we have been able to do. It is easy, right?
Yeah.
You can get on there, you can look for where you want to go, and hey, this is where I'm going to concentrate most of my time. So that, staying in an Airbnb, again, with the ability to have a kitchen and fully furnished,
Yeah.
it's a lot of a nicer hometown feel where you go there, that you're actually able to become part of and immersed in the culture of where you're visiting. But I don't know if the regulations that start in one country then trickle out to other countries. I think that's probably at least a good indication that there could be some changes that come along with it. But still, you have to do what's best for you and your family.
Yeah. So if you had a tip that was about Airbnbs, VRBOs, vacation rentals,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I would say definitely get second, third, fourth opinion. Like go on community chat groups or something in that area, or go to a trusted friend, somebody who's done it before. Don't just blindly think that what's being advertised is actually what you're going to get. And also, you know, Google search and look around and see as much, do your research, because you could be in an area that you're not really interested in, but it's all hyped to be exactly what you think you're looking for.
Yeah.
And now you're in a foreign country or a different place, and you may not be able to know how to get in and out of where you are or where it's putting you. And have a backup plan. Would be my other offer, is that just in case that doesn't work out or you find that it doesn't, then you have a backup plan as well.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today on the Realty Podcast. If you enjoyed the knowledge and entertainment today, please subscribe and share with your friends. We will be embarking on a journey that bridges the gap between realtors and clients, uncovering the heart and tea of real estate.